So I was chatting with someone recently who's thinking about starting a business, and they asked me, do you think now is a good time to open a cafe? Well, it's a good question to ask because on paper there's definitely some challenges. Inflation is crazy, coffee prices are at an all-time high, and coffee shops are failing faster than ever. But hear me out, for the right people, this might actually be the ideal opportunity. Let me explain, starting with a painful truth. Now here's the hard reality. Right now there are simply too many cafes and coffee shops in the market. There's too much supply and not enough demand. Now during COVID, the number of new cafes exploded. With widespread layoffs and more people working from home, suddenly a whole lot of new cafes started popping up, especially outside CBD areas. But since 2022, that trend has cooled down, and now a whole bunch of those businesses that were barely scraping by are shutting up shop. To put it in cold, hard economic terms, it's a market correction. Now, talking with people in the industry, it's a fact that more or less everyone accepts, but it's just not spoken about much. Because we all want to support small, local businesses, and we hate to see them fail. But that's exactly what's happening right now. Those businesses that were barely scraping by have been pushed over the edge by tough economic conditions. Now, the real problem for the future is, if we compare the number of cafes to the overall population, the number of potential customers per cafe is still lower than it was before COVID. And based on my admittedly rough projections, it doesn't look like it's going back to what it was. So if you're considering opening or buying a cafe, then this is something you definitely need to consider. It's a risky business, but it's also an attractive business to a lot of people. So it's likely that there'll always be too many cafes and coffee shops in the market. So that's the bad news, but there is an opportunity. Now, an experienced cafe owner I know opened a brand new cafe just a few months ago, right in the middle of all the economic pressures I just told you about. Now, they built it from an empty shell in a location on a busy main street with 5 or 6 established existing cafes, some of which have been there for over 15 years. And right from the start, it's been a massive success. What they did was they studied the market and the area, and they knew there was a gap. Now, the existing cafes in the area are all older in style. They have a full kitchen and they focus on meals. So they decided to go the other way with a bright, open, modern design, fresher, lighter food menu, and really fast service. Now, all of what I've just described is what's often called market positioning. And the classic test for market positioning is the 3 C's. So it starts with the customer. We first need to understand who are they and what do they want. It's not about us. It's about truly understanding, through research, their attitudes and their behaviours. Next are the competitors. Now, who are they targeting? What do they do well and what do they do not so well? And where can we have a relative advantage? And the final C is for company. What are we good at? What are our core competencies? And what can we deliver on better or differently to the other cafes in the area? Now, if we can find a strategy that connects with customers, is relatively different to competitors, and plays to our strengths as a business, then we're really giving ourselves the best chance of succeeding. Now, unfortunately, a clear strategy is the very thing that so few independent cafes and coffee shops consider. Many are started by amateur business owners without much experience, and they just don't have a solid strategy for how they're going to succeed. So the opportunity is this: focus less on the mood of the overall market and do your own research on the local market to put together a proper strategy. So I mentioned core competencies, and that's one of the main problems for a lot of people dreaming of opening a cafe or a coffee shop. They don't have the skills and they're simply not ready. A few years back, I spent time working as an account manager for a coffee roaster. So my job was to set up and manage partnerships with local cafes. Now, with these sort of deals, it wasn't just about selling coffee. Most of the time, the roaster would supply equipment, training, maintenance, signage, and a whole lot of other stuff as part of the deal, which could easily add up to 10 or 20 grand or more that we would need to invest up front. And that was a risk, particularly for new locations. If we invest that money, how likely are we to get a return? So we would need to put together the financials and try and get the company to approve the deal. Now, in these situations, the first question they would ask is this an experienced owner? And do they have a track record of success? And they knew an important truth, that you are the most important part of this equation. If the owner has the right competencies in hospitality and business, then that's generally the best indicator of whether this venture is going to succeed. So if you don't have experience in this business, then you need to start by doing something about that. Now, that could be spending time working on shift in cafes, could be doing a business course so you understand the fundamentals of business finance, managing staff and controlling costs. Now, even if you have some experience in hospitality, before you decide to dive in, you should really consider the gaps in your own expertise. Do you have people around you who can help with these, or is this something you need to learn? It's common to run into cafe owners who are great with the operational side of the business, but just don't know how to read a profit and loss report. Now that's a problem that can and should be fixed before you go into business for yourself. So coming back to that person I mentioned at the start, the one that asked me if I thought now is a good time to open a cafe. So they were someone who has experience in managing cafes, who understands the numbers and what they're aiming for. And they also had done their research on the location and put together a solid strategy based on this. And I think that's exactly what you need to do if you're starting out and you want to succeed. So if you want to get planning started on the right foot, then I think this video is the best place to begin.